All right, so Jim Heskett here talking with Nick Thacker. Hello, Nick.
Hey,
First of all, I wondered if you could just talk for a moment about what an honor and a privilege it's been to work with me.
mm, I can. I absolutely can. I won't though. It probably would take too long.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I completely understand. In the interest of
Yeah, yeah.
time, we should maybe we should have discussed it beforehand, but that's okay. Why don't you tell us about you, Nick Thacker, best-selling author and font snob?
Yeah, my favorite subject. But me, not the fonts. Fonts are okay, but I'm a thriller writer. I write action adventure, like archaeological type thrillers, mystery, and I've been doing it for a full time for about a year and a half. USA Today best-selling author just means I'm 1/20th of a best-selling author. I had a book and a box set that got on the list, so we got my letters. And I'm yeah, right. I'm like kind of at a point in my career where I'm trying to take the next kind of level up. So I'm doing a lot of admin type stuff. I'm getting some things outsourced to a VA, a personal assistant, and working with co-writers and managing payroll, things like that. So I'm not writing as much as I want these days, but that's all hopefully going to change once we get this infrastructure set up. But that's kind of where I am right now.
Hmm. So tell us about Harvey Bennett, the protagonist in the Enigma Strain and the Aryan Agenda and
Yeah.
other books.
Yeah, Harvey, we call him Ben. Ben Bennett is he was a park ranger at Yellowstone in the Enigma strain. Very reclusive, didn't really like people, sort of ran away from things in his life, which how he ended up at Yellowstone. And he gets sucked into a whirlwind of fun and activity when Julie, his now, spoiler alert, girlfriend slash almost wife, um, meets up with him to help solve the case of who's blowing up the volcano at Yellowstone. It was never supposed to be a series. I wrote it as a standalone. The challenge was I wanted, kind of a two main protagonists, a male and a female, working together. Um, but the readership liked it, and we're asking for more. And so I wrote a second, a third. Now we've got 6 books out in that series. And as you know, Jim, it's become kind of this universe thing where we've got other mini series kind of spun off from that. We've got Joe Bennett, we've got Gareth Red, which is kind of his sidekick. He's got his own series now. So it's really just morphed into this big multi-author universe, which is really cool. It's really neat to be able to work with authors who are way better than I am at writing, using their skill set to build out my own characters and world and stuff. It's really cool. Pretty neat.
Where did the idea come from to put him in a national park? Do you have ranger experience or experience with Yellowstone specifically?
I've never been to Yellowstone. I've actually never been to a national park at all. That's not true, but I've never been to Yellowstone. I do love the outdoors. I do love that, kind of what I imagine that environment looks like. I live in Colorado Springs half the year. And so I just love that kind of, I wanted to put him in a setting like that where, if you're a guy who's like Harvey Bennett, where do you go? Where do you work to go get away from people in life? And to me, the answer was Yellowstone. I don't think that's a perfect answer, but he didn't know that. So he ran away to go become a park ranger. I do not have park ranger experience. I tried to do a little bit of research on, what is a park ranger? How do you become one? I don't think I got it right. I've gotten called out by a reader before for, somebody he would never be a park ranger for that age, or okay, whatever. You worked in a national park, call it what you want.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
no, that came out of just I think the opening scene after the prologue is Harvey working with relocating a nuisance grizzly at Yellowstone, and I for some reason had that scene in my mind, and so I wrote it. I think that's how it just morphed into, well, he's a park ranger. What's he running away from? Why? I think I wrote the scene first before it was all planned.
I've definitely done that before where a completed, what will become a completed book basically came from an image or a scene that just
Mhm.
appeared in my mind and then everything spread out from there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But like you said about people liked Harvey and they wanted more. What do you think when you didn't intend that? What do you think it is about Harvey that's compelling? Why did people want to see more with him?
I love that question. I've tried to answer it a lot. It's my guess, but I think people like him because he is the everyman character. What I basically did when I was designing this book, not knowing it was going to be a series, though, I thought to myself, what does Jack Reacher look like before he's Jack Reacher? How do you build a superhero, right? We all have these, character origin stories, but typically we throw the reader into the middle of their life as the superhero, and then we give them challenges and all that. We show him what the kryptonite is, but they're already a superhero. So I wanted a Jack Reacher type. I wanted a guy who's strong and capable and resilient before he's those things,
Hmm.
before he knows he's those things. So it's sort of, I'm like writing this origin story with the Enigma strain. And it turns out that what he ends up as is, the hero of, the civilian special operations, which doesn't even show up really until book 3. So that's what I think people like about him. He seems relatable for that reason, because he's not, Jack Reacher is literally, Lee Child has described him as, what would it be like to be the kind of guy who's never afraid to walk around at night because he can beat up anyone or do anything. There's definitely an appeal to that. I love those books, but I wanted the exact opposite. And kind of, what does it look like for a guy just to be a normal guy thrust into worldwide chaos and have to come out the other side a victor?
Yeah, there's something really interesting about that template of a person where they come from just being an everyman or an everywoman, and then when faced with an extraordinary circumstance, they find something in themselves to take that action and become the hero of the story. That's a really interesting transition to watch in a story where a person becomes a hero over the course of the story when they
Right. I
don't.
mean, you sort of did that in Nail Gun. Is it kind of the same sort of thing, same approach? I like that.
So now as we're getting a little closer to the actual topic of what we're here to talk about, you mentioned
You.
before that expand, right, me. Um, how's this going, by the way? Is the interview going well? You feel like it's
It's
going
going
well?
well. Yeah. Hey, enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me?
So let's talk about that when you talked about having co-authors and the admin stuff that you're doing. So we've got this little project, or you've got this project, and I've become a part of it over the last few months, and that's the Harvey Bennett Expanded Universe. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about how that came to be and how it's working?
Well, I'm sitting in a conference room at the 20 Books to Vegas conference, which is a group that started with Michael Anderle's vision for writing a lot of books and releasing them and making a crap ton of money. Um, I haven't done any of those things, but the goal, part of the way he achieved his goal, was by working with other writers who are able to produce all these books, and he stamps his name on it, and they call it a day. Um, that's all well and good. I felt like what I wanted was more of a just I wanted to make friends with other writers and work together with them. And so rather than it being, a James Patterson model where these writers are essentially working as ghostwriters, they get their name on the cover, but they're really just writing the book and James gets to put his name on it. I wanted to find writers who were every bit as good, if not better than me at writing, who could take a character of mine and just make it their own. And so, like you filled in Harvey's backstory in some ways, and Mike's done the same thing with another prequel. Joe Bennett came out of Dave's head. Like it's not. I didn't have no concept that she even existed until he came up with it. And so that's been really cool to see some of the things that I left open because I'm lazy and didn't want to write the backstory. Um, I also didn't want to write myself into a hole. Has been kind of the fodder for these other stories that like Mike said, hey, you talk about this grizzly scene. Can I write that? Yeah, sure. So it's been really neat, and it's been fun to make these connections with other authors like you, because again, I keep going back to it. Like I don't think people read my books because of how good of a writer I am, meaning like the prose. I'm never going to win a Pulitzer for my writing style. They read my books because they're fun stories. I hope
Mhm.
that's what I'm trying to write. And so I wanted to find other writers who didn't have to try to be my style. That's not why people read the book. They have their own style. You are still Jim, but you're writing a book in my universe. So the goal is that you still have your own readership over there, but you're just going to gain some more because mine are going to be like, hey, I really like the way Jim writes. Even though it's Harvey Bennett, like I can hear some Jim in there, and I want to go read his stuff because it's good. So that was kind of the difference in model. I wanted to be more of more of a collaboration than well, I'm the main famous guy and everybody else can do whatever they want, but it has to sound like me.
Mhm.
That's not at all what I wanted.
So speaking of filling out Harvey Bennett's backstory, so the the book that you and I have co-authored is titled "The Severed Pines," and it takes place about 6 or 7 years before the Enigma strain. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because you've read it more recently than I have.
Yeah, it's a good old fashioned murder mystery, which I love because that's not a genre that I've not really gone into yet. I don't know the tropes well enough to really pull it off, but you can, and you did. So it's a good old fashioned murder mystery. We were opening scene essentially. Ben Harvey is faced with a dead body. I mean, he's a young 20 something guy, and not, like I said, not a superhero. So he's like, what do I do? This is weird. Then the body disappears, and the cops are being a little sketch about it. The guys at the park are, people are lying, and he just gets wound up in this kind of this mystery that has a few ties back into the main Harvey Bennett universe with some of the implications that some of the bad guys are involved with, the later Draconis Industries stuff. Um, I'm still, like I said, I owe you, like I have to fill it out a little bit more in some spots that I want to do that, imply some of the bad guy stuff. But the book is essentially, it's done. It's ready as is. You've written this murder mystery and woven this tapestry with all these characters that I never would have been able to pull off. So it's going to be a good book. I'm really excited about.
Tapestry. Very well.
I like that. Yeah. I'm a writer, so I know words like tapestries.
Yeah, the Severed Pines was very fun for me to write because although I certainly don't know Ben as well as you do, I set the book in Rocky Mountain National Park, which is a place I'm very familiar with.
Right.
And so that was really the main draw for me, was to show a younger Ben, someone who is not quite as confident as he is in the later books, and someone who's more. Yeah. Although I don't think there's a whole lot about his backstory. There's still a lot about his backstory that's not been revealed. You get to see a portrait of a younger Ben who's kind of trying to figure himself out. I don't know what 20-something has themselves figured out. So that was
right.
That's what intrigued me was writing at that time. And speaking of that, because it does take place several years before, and you've got all these, you're working with a half dozen authors now who are writing books all along the timeline of Ben's life. How do you keep it all together? How do you know what comes before when, and when things are supposed to fit on the timeline of Ben's life?
I have a literal timeline. I use a program called Eon Timeline, and it literally is a visual chronological timeline that I can zoom in, zoom out, whatever. And so as books are being written, I'll set that in the timeline, and basically if we don't know what the date is, I'll make something up. I'll pick a day. This happened between this date and this date. And then we can actually see where everything is pieced together. And so it's essentially just that's part of the management burden, is a lot of these questions like, well, how old is Ben? Exactly. When did his parents die? Exactly. Are things I never answered in the Enigma strain, but I have to have answered for other writers, because even though it doesn't really matter when his birthday is, we have to know how old he was when, he's hanging out with Jo Bennett, because she's over here. And, so it's one of those things where it is a big burden to keep track of. But as I add more and more to the wiki, to the calendar, or through the timeline, it becomes a lot easier, because it's just, okay, cool. Thankfully, these books all take place. Yours are prequels, but they're modern. Like, they're happening, it's not futuristic. There's no weird time stuff. So it's happening in a linear, set, fixed amount of time. And so within, reason, it's pretty easy to just put it and slot it in and say, this is when it happened. And then everything else can just kind of be built around it. So, and then with the other characters, it's easy because they're off doing their own thing. And it's a prequel for them, origin story for them. So it really doesn't matter. They're never going to meet until the Enigma strain or later anyway. So it's basically, it's hard at first, and then it gets easier as the more information and data gets put in.
So in this interview, I really want the people watching and listening to get a good sense of Ben. So here's the moment of truth, Nick. Ben versus Jack Reacher in a fight.
Yeah, honestly, I think Jack Reacher wins hands down, because Ben has never been trained to fight. He's not a, so again, Jack Reacher can do anything, right? He's a sniper with a pistol, right? He's a crack shot. He's got insane, fighting skills, physical ability, prowess. The thing about Ben that gives him a fighting chance is he's just a bear of a man, and he just doesn't give up. He's super. He can take a lot of punches, and I've tested that in a lot of the books.
So what if? Okay, so I really want to dig into this. So Ben and Jack Reacher are fighting, and Jack is winning hands down. What if Jack Bauer shows up and he loud whispers some support to Ben? Then do you think he might tip the scales a little bit?
I think so, because the whole point of the Harvey Bennett universe is it's not about Harvey, it's this cast of characters. And so, without like Reggie's support, without Julie's support, without Mr. and Mrs. E or whatever, I don't think he stands a chance. But give him a Jack Bauer to whisper in his ear. cool cryptic things that only he understands and not the viewing audience, then I think he's got a fighting chance. Absolutely.
Excellent. Is there anything else you want people to know? Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't have anything else I want to talk about. I want to talk about you all day long.
Well, yeah. So
That's
tune
what
in.
time we got.
Tune in next time for our extended 90-minute interview,
There you go.
talking
Yeah.
all about me. And well,
I do want to
Nick.
hear the story of your hair, actually. So, you cut your hair. You were this haggard, criminal-looking man. I'm just kidding. You went from like Metallica in 1980s to Metallica late 90s, early 2000s. What happened?
Yeah. I know you guys were giving me a hard time in the Slack channel about James Hetfield. I cut all my hair off. My hair was down to my shoulders, and I just recently cut it off because it was time. And I put a photo of me with short hair on my Facebook page, and everybody said I looked like Negan, which I'm not quite sure how to take that.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I have mixed feelings about that comparison.
That was a little terrifying. Yeah, I could see that though. But the wife's okay with it. She's good. The
Oh
kids.
yeah. She's good. It was time anyway. It was. I hadn't had a haircut in about 3 years, so it was time for it to go.
There you go.
Anyway, Nick, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and answering a few questions about Harvey Bennett and the Harvey Bennett Expanded Universe, and about our book, The Severed Pines.
Yeah, get it late this month or whenever this goes live.
All right. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thanks.